Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you. How's that for volume? Can you hear me all right?
It's perfect, Richard. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Well, yes, I'm basically a petroleum geologist. I worked in the oil industry for a number of years. I had 5 gap years from Imperial College, traveling the world at other people's expense and gambling with other people's money. And like many geologists, I'm very interested in wine and naturally the impact of geology on wine. That's been one of my sort of retirement research projects. So the title of my talk is The Impact of Geology and Climate Change on 2,000 Years of British Viticulture. Now, what got me into this is the battle between the terroirists and the anti-terroirists. Many of you who enjoy wine will be familiar with the word terroir. And I got here 2 definitions for you. The resultant wine is the result of grape variety, terroir, vintage, and winemaker. And Andrew Jefford, the name may be familiar to you, as a great wine writer. Fermentation seems to draw out the grape's memory of the stone in which it once buried its roots, of the view of the valley that it had as it ripened, and the ever-changing weather pattern it enjoyed or endured. One of my geological colleagues, the late Professor Jake Hancock, said, the concept of terroir is a blend of medieval mysticism and second-rate French science. So this is the sort of thing that gets geologists highly amused. This is some of the results of the International Geoviticultural Society Wine Speak Geobabble Awards. I'll just take you through some of these. Highly commended, Louis Latour 2006. Matt Smith of Waitrose described as a lovely minerality. Val Maison 2009 Chablis, characteristic chalky minerality. Saint-Jean-Julienus 2009 with an insistent seam of minerality. And so we go on down, a smoky minerality, a German Riesling, Rheingau, a lovely mineral texture. Another Riesling, a lovely juicy chalkiness of texture. A mineral streak that emanates from the complex soils of the region. But the winner went to a 2007 Douro wine from Portugal, which was described as having a chiseled minerality, which somehow captures the energy of vine roots forcing their way through vertical strata of schist. Now, this is the sort of thing that makes geologists giggle and fall off their chairs, this sort of writing. Now, Jake Hancock had a look at this business of what is terroir, and he discovered this amazing thing, the brandy bullseye. Some of you may be familiar with brandy and enjoy cognac, brandy drinkers. There's something very curious about brandy. The quality of brandy decreases in increasing circles radiating out from the town of Cognac. So the best cognacs are produced right by the town, and the different terroirs decrease in quality. Now that, the winemakers will tell you out there, the brandy makers, it's due to the chalkiness of the soil. Now, Professor Hancock took a look at this. There's a geological map of the area and these different bois quality zones. And isn't that funny? The strike of the rock is northwest, southeast, and the chalky soils go straight across these concentric circles. And he researched this and discovered that what happened was the president of the Geological Society of France ran a field trip to this area that he'd been studying. And the party had such a convivial dinner, they missed the last train back to Paris. And he was asked to give an after-dinner speech in which he advanced this ridiculous theory that the quality of cognac decreases in ever-increasing circles from the town of Cognac due to the chalkiness. And that's now handed on. All the textbooks, all the marketing of cognac says the terroir is all due to the chalkiness of the soil. Well, this is absolute rubbish. So I started my retirement project, one of them, was to look at English vineyards, the geological control on them. And I put together a database of all the vineyards there ever had been from Roman times onwards. And I'll take you through this and you'll see where it got to. Roman vineyards. This map shows the location of supposed Roman vineyards. Most of this are spurious, but there are some very genuine ones in what we call the Côte de Northants, where there were many hectares of wine being grown, probably for the legionnaires in York and up on the Hadrian's Wall. So we have Roman viticulture, and then everything collapses in the Dark Ages. And then in medieval times, we've got a very good database, largely based on the Domesday Book, but vineyards spread right the way across southern and middle England. Almost every monastery would have had a vineyard. They need the wine for communion and conviviality and so on. Little Ice Age, 15th to the 19th century, vineyards are all restricted to the southeast of England. Complete collapse in viticulture, apart from one very eccentric vineyard owner up in Derbyshire. And now today, this is the distribution of vineyards at the millennium, year 2000. So of course one could update that and probably put another 50 vineyards on that map if one wanted to. So I looked at the geology and what was it that actually controlled the distribution of vineyards? And one of the things that I noted very early on was from my study, I looked out across the North Downs, the chalk of the North Downs, lovely south-facing slope, global warming, and a friend of mine, Sir Adrian White, bought Lord Ashcombe's Denbies estate. Just for a joke, I wrote him a report saying, you've got a great place for a vineyard, south-facing slope, chalk, which is what champagne is grown on, global warming, go for it. And he built there, founded there what was then at 260 acres, the largest vineyard in England. There are larger ones now, as chalk vineyards in particular have really taken off. This is a map of the original planting of Denbies Vineyard. And this is quite important to understand the theme of my story. Those of you familiar with wine will see some very familiar names: Chardonnay, Schönberger, Reichensteiner, Seyvel Blanc, Müller-Thurgau, Riesling, etc., etc. Those are very cool climate Germanic grape varieties. And this was the original planting map for Denbies in 1986. This is now over 30 years ago since this was first planted. So I put that database together and I suddenly realized, goodness me, I can map the distribution of vineyards for 2,000 years across England. And that's what I'm showing on this slide. It looks rather like the Battle of El Alamein or something, but what it is showing is that Roman vineyards got up here well into the Midlands, possibly Lincoln, but a bit dodgy, but that's the limit of Roman vineyards. Then viticulture collapsed in the Dark Ages, re-established M for medieval in the medieval period, then collapsed in the Little Ice Age down here to the southeast, and now is advancing northwards, the great renaissance of English viticulture. And I fantasize, I put all this work together. It couldn't really be published in any learned journal. It was geology, it was archaeology, it was history, it was œnology. So I self-published it, which is a great thing to do because you can leave all your own jokes in and things like that, and you don't have school children doing the marketing. And I predicted, and this is now 2004, the future of viticulture with continued global warming. And I had these arrows here, hypothetical, the northern advance of viticulture. And I realized one could actually tie in those episodes with climate change. This is a graph of annual temperature for the United Kingdom. That's 15 degrees. And this is time. We're off on the right here. End of the last glacial advance, about 12,000 years ago, temperature rose, very warm in the Holocene climate optimum. Then we have here Roman temperatures we believe were warmer probably than even today. Then we have the Dark Age, the Saxon sag or the Dark Age drop, the medieval warm period, the Little Ice Age, and we're now coming out of that. And oh my goodness, I'm actually able to map the advance and retreat of vineyards across England over 2,000 years. Now, of course, as you will all know, correlation doesn't indicate causation, first law of statistics, but it does make you think, doesn't it? So I fantasize, so what is the future of viticulture likely to be? I rather fancied the south shores, the northwest shores of Loch Ness. There's an aerial photograph of Loch Ness. Here we've got a lovely southeast facing slope. We've got alluvial fans here, which is very good for growing wine on. We've got rocks up here, which are very similar to the rocks of the South African, the Cape province. And we do a little geophantasmogram here, cross section through the Côte d'Écosse in 2100, perhaps, with our glacial fluvial sands and gravels here on the slope, and then horrible metamorphic rocks and granites and things here, much like the Paarl region of South Africa. And I published this book, and with the help of the Imperial College Press Office, it got quite a lot of publicity. It still does, for readers of the Graniad will know that. And the Daily Express picked up the press release with this marvelous title, Try Chateau Loch Ness for a Monster Hangover. Moving swiftly on, a little bit more serious science. Let's think for a moment about the areas across the world where viticulture can take place. Normally, viticulture occurs globally where the average annual temperature is between 10 and 20 degrees Celsius. So here we have the vineyards of California, the vineyards of Euroland. We're just in that limit, southern England here, 10 degrees, and the vineyards of the southern hemisphere, Chile, Argentina, the Cape of South Africa, Australia, Western Australia, Southern Australia, and New Zealand, right at the southern limit of viticulture. So I thought, okay, well, let's take a look at what the temperature is likely to be in England through time. This is the average annual temperature for England in 1900, where the temperature is over 10 degrees. Theoretically, this is where you should be able to cultivate vines. And there were one or two vineyards at the turn of the century, but that's another story. Year 2000, the millennium, over 10 degrees cutoff. At the millennium, you should be able to grow vines and produce wine right the way across England, much of Wales, not this little bit of the Chilterns, not Exmoor, not Dartmoor, not Bonbin Moor, and not further north. And predicted annual average temperature for 2080, the whole of England, apart from the top of Dartmoor, most of Wales, apart from the Snowdonia, most of northern England, apart from the high Pennines and the southern uplands. But that's pretty rough and ready, isn't it? Take a look at this map. The year doesn't matter. This is July isotherms. This is the critical time of the year in the northern hemisphere where the grapes are ripening, July through to September. Average July temperatures, 17 maximum here. The really hot spots in July are the Severn Valley, the foot of the Cotswolds here, the Thames Valley, the Thames Basin here, the Hampshire Basin, and the coast of Devon and Cornwall, the Côte de Cornubia, if you prefer. All right, so the year doesn't matter, but the month does. That's where the hottest temperatures were in 1988, and presumably that you could extrapolate to the future. So now, temperature rise by the 2080s. This is from the data from the Hadley Centre for Climate Prediction and Research, which is the research branch of the Met Office. And they predicted temperatures right up to 2080. Winter temperature is not important for us. Summer temperature is. What this is showing is that southern England, we may expect summer temperatures to be 5 degrees above present and declining, as you see here, progressively northwards as we approach Scotland. Okay. Now, those of you who enjoy wine will be familiar with this map, with this graph, but don't panic if you're not familiar with it. Let me talk you through it. Up at the top, this is cool climate, intermediate climate, warm and hot. Average growing season, temperature, NH Northern Hemisphere, SH Southern. So at the limit of viticulture, like Germany, you could grow Müller, Thurgau, Gris, Pinot Gris, Gewürz, Traminer, Riesling, just about Pinot Noir. Temperature warming, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, Cabernet Franc, and then with temperature gradually increasing, Merlot, Malbec, Viognier, Syrah, and so on, Cabernet Sauvignon. And right at the end, when the temperature is really high, you produce nothing but raisins. Okay, are you comfortable with that? Right, so roll of drums and a trumpet fanfare. So the finale of all of this is this map. What I've done here is to take those highest temperatures that we saw for the July isotherms, and that figure, the previous figure showing the temperature for different grape varieties, and extrapolated that for 2080. What this is saying to us is by 2080, Germanic grape varieties like Müller-Thurgau, you can make wines from them up on the slopes of Snowdonia, on the Peak District, up in the high Pennines and in the southern uplands. Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir, the classic sparkling white wines of Champagne, you'll be able to make over the areas shown there in yellow. Southern England, where we are now producing very fine sparkling wines from the Holy Trinity, the temperatures will be right for Merlot and Viognier. At the moment, there are 1 or 2 vineyards that have some Merlot, but they produce them in polytunnels. But by 2080, the Hampshire Basin and the London Basin will be too hot for viticulture, good for nothing more than raisins. And we can see this, we've got a beautiful case history with Denbis, planted 1986 to 93 with Germanic grape varieties. They've all gone. By 2005, in fact, later, the Germanic grape varieties have largely gone. What they're planting now very extensively is the Holy Trinity, the 3 grape varieties for sparkling white wine: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, a lot with quite a few other varieties. But those of you who follow English wine will know that's the magic of chalk. For very detailed technical geological reasons I can explain if you like, but the magic of chalk with that Holy Trinity, we're now producing classy sparkling white wines. We can't call Champagne, of course, but it's interesting that now the Champagne area is getting too hot for making sparkling Champagne. And in fact, Taittinger, one of the big Champagne houses, has now bought a lot of chalk land in southeast England. And there are chalk vineyards like Denbis springing up all across south-facing slopes of chalk. And you can see this. This is Denbis grape varieties, original planting on the left, the 86 to 93, Auxerrois, Bacchus, which is England's answer to Sauvignon Blanc, very good white wine, Dornfelder, Huxelrebe, Müller-Thurgau, and all those Germanic varieties, gone by 2009, increased Chardonnay, Ortega, Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir, Rondeau, which makes a red wine, Sauvignon Blanc, and Solaris. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very quick tour of a one-day short course. And I would only say the future's bright, the future's olives. This is a photograph of me sitting with my olive grovelet. I had 2 olive bushes with the virgin harvest of olives. I can't say that they're very pleasant. They don't get the little red bit in the middle. Well done. Keep up. And palm wine by 2100. There's the end. Here's to global warming.